Hi there, and welcome back to the Energy Sector Heroes podcast. My name is Michelle Fraser, and every week I will speak with incredible people who share their lessons, experiences, and stories from their time spent in the energy sector. Hi there, and welcome back again to this week's episode. If you're new to the show, then please take a second to subscribe and even consider sharing the show with just one other person. This week, I am joined by Mario Del Pino. Mario is an incredible data team lead, also a professor at the University Canada West, which it's hard to believe he looks so young, actually. Mario, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Oh, hi, hello. I'm so happy to be here, Michelle. Thank you very much for inviting me. I wouldn't know how to start, but I always say that I'm when they ask me like, what are you, right? Like, I always say that I'm a stubborn and unapologetic petroleum engineer. I've studied my bachelor's degree in petroleum engineering, and I did 2 master's degree in the subject. And I've been working in the industry since then. The first time I visited an oil rig was in 1992 when I was 1 year old. So I can say that I have 30 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, even though I'm very young.
Wow, how did you manage to go on a platform that young?
So it wasn't a platform. It was an onshore rig, right? But my father, he's a geologist. At that time, he was a field geologist, right? So, in 1992 in Argentina, I would guess that safety standards were not as strict as they are today, right? So my mother, she passed by. She was living nearby, and they were doing some exploratory wells in the south of Argentina. And we passed by, we visited, and we have a bunch of pictures from that visit.
Okay, excellent. So how did you actually get started in the oil industry? Were you hooked in from then?
Yeah, pretty much, right? So I don't really remember a time where I didn't want to be, a petroleum engineer or at least an energy professional. I went straight from high school to study petroleum engineering, which is not a very common, career to pursue in many cases, right? It's many people, many times you get out from high school and it's like, okay, what should I study, right? And a lot of my peers, they had this very, deep existential crisis because they had no idea what they wanted to do. And to me, it was always very clear, right? I remember since I was, 5 years old, 10 years old, going to the office, looking at all the maps, seeing the incredible work that, energy professionals do. And it just felt natural. It is the place where I was meant to be.
Okay. So how do you think you were meant to be in the oil industry?
Because I grew into it, right? So, I was always in touch with maps, with diagrams, with engineering drawings. And I felt it's such an enticing industry, it's such big projects, so much impact. And seeing the love that, these professionals, my father and his peers, the amount of love that they would show for the industry, it really grabbed me, right? And to me, I never really questioned it. Again, once I finished high school, it was like I need to go there, right? Like that's my place to be. And first it was, my father is he's a geologist, and I decided to kind of go to the dark side. I went to engineering, so we had a couple of fights about that. But it's an amazing industry. It's an amazing space where a very mindful, very very technically driven, energetic person can really make an impact. So it felt like the right place for me to be.
Okay. You actually also lecture part-time as well. What made you
that's right.
do that?
Sorry?
What made you actually go into lecturing?
So I always had a bit of a storytelling nature, I enjoy having a captive audience. And I always enjoy teaching, like sharing knowledge. When I was at university, I would always enjoy kind of leading, study groups, right? So, I came here. Maybe I can tell you a bit. I don't know. Maybe you want to go. We can go back and then we can get into my current positions. But basically, I came to Canada. I came to Vancouver. I've been kind of specializing myself in everything that has to do with data and digitalization, right? And this university, they are growing very fast. They are expanding the number of students that they have each term. I applied for the position for business analytics, right? Which, very close to what a data analyst, a data scientist, would feel comfortable working with. And I always had a bit of a business drive, right? So I think it was a very good match there.
Okay, no, that sounds amazing. So, do you get a lot back from lecturing?
Absolutely, yes, it's great. Like in my case, so like what I try to do is, because business analytics, it's a very math centered course, right? And in an MBA, so this is, I teach at an MBA. So in an MBA, you see people that are not necessarily mathematically driven, right? So you have your good share of, accountants, a good share of engineers, but you also see psychologists, right? You see people, from arts, right? And they don't tend to be very, they most of them, they spend the last few years of their lives without having to worry much about the impact of math, right, and statistics. So this is a bit of an intro course on, how you can actually use these amazing tools, these statistic tools, to drive business decisions. I like to frame it that business analytics, it's this discipline that allows you to leverage the data that you have in any business in order to drive a more robust, fastest business decision-making process, right? So I framed the whole course in this hypothetical company called Alma Cafe. And the idea is that it's this kind of boutique coffee shop, right? And I use that example so that, they can kind of grasp the idea that any business can benefit from data, right? Any business that really embraces the power and the value that data brings, you can improve your processes, you can improve your decisions, you can change your business model, right? And we're seeing this in the energy sector, right? We're seeing that this massive hunger for operators and for service companies to embed different data-driven technologies in order to, make better decisions faster, reducing costs, increasing safety. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of the technologies that are out there, right? And that we're still in this, I think we're still in this a bit of a divergence path. So like technologies tend to have this kind of divergence process, and then they converge towards the business models that actually, are proven to generate value and that the market accepts. I think we're beginning to get to that convergence path. So like the business models, the technologies that the industry is actually benefiting from are the ones that are surviving this kind of their winning process. But the industry is hungry for it, right? And go grab any journal, right? Like the Journal of Petroleum Technology. You're going to find a whole bunch of different articles about, how digital technology, how new technologies are helping to drive the challenges that the industry has, right? How we can address them, and how we are trying to reinvent the way we operate. How do we address risk, right? And how eventually we're going to get to be an actual sustainable industry.
Okay, do you really think there will be a sustainable industry?
I guess that we can get into a very complex and long discussion of what sustainable means, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the best way to do that is to frame it on the energy trilemma, right? So energy needs to be affordable, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be sustainable, right? So there is no single solution that matches every single one of those checks, right? Every single one of the solutions that we have, every single one of the technologies that we have, is going to have a balance on that. And it's not only a technology problem, right? It's not only constrained by technology, or it's not only driven by technology, it's also constrained by the resources that you have. So, for example, one of the latest courses, trainings that I did was at the Institute of Technology of Buenos Aires. And it's called management of energy transitions in plural, right?
Okay.
And the argument behind that is that there's not a single transition, right? There is a multitude of transitions where each single country needs to find its own path, because it's going to depend on the state you are at right now, and what are the resources, right, and the sources that you can actually tap into to get to that sustainable future that we're all envisioning. In that sense, sustainability and the transition, right, is also going to be different industry-wise, right? So transitioning for the oil and gas industry is going to have a certain shape, it's going to follow a certain path. The same we're going to see for the construction industry, the same we should be seeing for the agricultural industry. So we are all, struggling and facing this massive challenge, right? And I think that the oil and gas industry has, first, I would say the most important thing that it has are the professionals, right? We have the gray matter to actually go and face these massive challenges. We've seen massive challenges before. We are an industry that we do not run away from challenges, right? We actually embrace them and we like them, right? So I think we're in a very good track, and I think that those professionals that actually recognize these challenges and the opportunities that they have are the ones that are going to be able to thrive.
Okay, so what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge to get to sustainability then?
The biggest challenge, I think it wouldn't be fair to say there's a single one, right? Like, it's very hard to see this massive, huge scale of a problem and try to see it on a unidimensional, right? Like a unidimensional problem. I think there are many of them. Technology is one, right? And it's one where we tend to feel very comfortable on, right? Because we know how to manage technology development. In the end, technology is going to follow its development path, its development speed, right? We can certainly help that push forward and to speed up. But there are many other factions like social response, like political response, that, many times we are more subject to those responses than actually able to influence them, right? I think that, to me, and especially as a energy professional, it's social response, right? And I think that all of energy professionals in the oil and gas industry, we face that challenge. Like, many of us have, we've second thought, is this the right career, right, that I should go for, right? Is there a future in this? Like, is this, a good thing? Being supportive of the oil and gas industry is that like morally positive? And the more time it passes, right, I'm getting more and more convinced that we should be proud of what we do. We should be convinced that we are bringing a net positive to the world, right? And I think that overall, the energy professional needs to be proud of what he and she does, right? There's a plot. I'm an engineer. I'm a nerd, so I tend to like plots, right? And there's a plot that I call the most beautiful plot in the industry that shows pretty much a straight line between energy consumption per capita versus GDP per capita. And it's amazing for each one, for every single country. And it's amazing the linear relationship. Well, they are logarithmic scales, right? But still, you can see a straight line there. But it's amazing to see such a close relationship between, the energy that a country, a society needs, and, how much they can thrive inside that society. And the fact that our industry has been, consistently over the last century providing the energy for the world to develop and to get out of poverty is something that we should recognize, right? And we should be proud of, all that effort that we put in order to get so many people out of poverty and actually get people to thrive, right? There's a lot, and certainly we are not done with that, right? We still need to keep pushing to eradicate poverty, to eradicate hunger, right? And we're still going to have a major role on that, right? So I think that the mental blocks that many of us, suffer from this whole energy transition dilemma, right? It's something that we need to learn how to deal with, right? We need to have more open discussions and we need to be more honest about many of the topics that are being discussed. But I am a very strong promoter of the idea that, as an oil and gas professional, you should be proud of it and you should keep your chin high up.
I agree. Do agree. So, did you have any mentors during your career?
Mentors, no, not really. I was in contact with a lot of great professionals, both, leaders, peers, reports. I think that we can get inspiration from, everyone who's in this industry. We are all so unique, so diverse. We all can have the capacity of bringing so much, on the table. But something, if you want me to bring some highlights, I would say, so maybe we can go back and maybe I can tell you a bit of my career track. Like what were the places where I work on, and maybe I can pinpoint some of those operations that I found along the way. So I graduated from university in 2015, right? The eyes full of promises, right? And wanted to thinking that the world's an oyster, and suddenly the oil went from $200 to nothing, right? So we had that massive price crash. Like we were talking about, $200 oil barrel, but suddenly I remember I was in I think it was in Malaysia. I went for one of these congresses. I went as a student, and the oil price had just dropped. It had just plummeted, and all the projects, froze, and suddenly it was, getting into the industry, with this massive shock, right? And all of us who have been on the industry for a while, we know it is like that, right? It is a seasonal, cyclical industry. Cyclical, not seasonal, but the cyclical industry. But I got very lucky. I'm very grateful that I got hired by Repsol. So Repsol, they call it the mini major, right? For example, when you read Wood Mackenzie's analysis, they refer to Repsol as a mini major because it has kind of the attitude, and kind of the appearance or the marketing of a major, right? They are trying to fill those shoes, but it's a great company, and they took me to Madrid. I was for a year in Spain and Scotland, and then I came back to Peru, and I began working on Block 57, right? And Block 57, it's a block that it's in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Crazy logistics, like having to fly rigs by helicopter. So pretty much, dismember them, right? Fly them to the other side, 2,000 tons of materials, and then rig everything up like a Lego, right? So crazy operations, crazy logistics. And it's something that I always recognize is the amount of teamwork that involved, a pipeline, a well, a whole facility, that doesn't get built by aliens from outer space, that's done by us, professionals, right? A whole teams, whole companies that were working together to actually, pull off, these rabbits out of the hat, massive infrastructure in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. So, getting that first-hand experience, my first job working at such massive projects, it's something that I think it was amazing. I will always be deeply grateful, for having that opportunity. So when I came back to Peru, I began working on drill engineering. I was a well site drill engineer. We drill, in that time we were drilling the Sagaris wells, and we drilled one exploratory well when dry. But these were wells where, gas condensate wells, so very large casings and tubings. We're maximizing the amount of gas that we could get, minimizing the amount of wells we had to drill. So that meant that every piece of technology that we could put into those wells, like it was going to be there, very high profile wells. So, getting a lot of experience with, state of the art technology, right? Once I finished that, that was my first experience. And when I was at university as a petrol engineer, you always kind of have this idea that, you either are a drill engineer, a production engineer, or a reservoir engineer, and we are all like, like teams, oh no, I want to be a drill engineer, I want to be a production engineer, I want to be a reservoir engineer. And, I got to Repsol, and the first year was like, okay, you're a drill engineer, right? Okay, I'll fit those boots, right? I'll try those boots. And after a year, you're like, okay, I like these boots, like I want to develop my career in this, right? But the things that the project was over, we didn't have any more drilling projects, and there weren't any expatriate opportunities either. So what the option that appeared was, okay, we need a construction supervisor for this gas compression plant. And at first I was like, I don't want construction engineer, what is that? I'm supposed to be a drill engineer, that's what I studied for. But a bit, with a bit of a grudge, I went, okay, I'll do it, and my God, like the opportunity of being the supervisor for, this multi-million-dollar project, again, making a massive infrastructure in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, leading with logistics, learning to deal with contractors, an unbeatable experience, right? And then that was a year, and the project ended. And then I was like, okay, I like being a construction engineer. I could be this. I want to be a facilities engineer, okay? And then there was like, okay, we have no more facility projects, right? Okay, Mario, go to be production, do some production, right? I was like, damn, again, But by that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to embrace change, But that time I realized, this is an opportunity. And I was lucky because, this being a very recent development, Repsol had put, a state-of-the-art SCADA system, right? So we had sensors everywhere. I would always joke and say that the only place that we were missing sensors were the bathrooms, right? Because we could see everything. We could see pressure, temperature, flow rate, everything. We knew what was happening on that field at every single second. And at that time, that should have been 2018 maybe. Okay, so my first response was, okay, I sit down, I look at the screens, and I see all this data that was showing me flow rate and pressure. And, petroleum engineers, we know that if you have a well and you have flow rate and you have pressure, you can build an IPR curve, right? An inflow performance relation, or, a productivity function. So I say, okay, I'm going to do that, right? So I download the data and and we had a very terrible plugin to do that. And I realized that it's like 300,000 data points, right? And like, there's no way you can build, a simple model with that on Excel. Like Excel couldn't handle that amount of information. And that was how I got into data. When a friend of mine, he's a physicist, he told me, like, okay, you have that amount of data, you should really learn data science. I was like, data science, what is that? And I taught myself that, right? I took a couple of online courses, but I hate kind of guided learning. I was like, okay, give me the basics, and I'll just read as many books as I can. And so I began to actually implement all of these data science techniques on my day-to-day work, right? And it was eye-opening. It was like seeing light, like you have all this data. Like I was sitting next to these servers with, teras of data that no one was using, right? So I was a kid in a candy store in that sense. Then, I did kind of a year there in production, and then I moved to be a project engineer. And eventually I was assigned to be kind of the digitalization lead, digitalization focal point for the local asset. So I begin to see how do we implement new technologies, right? So that we can improve our processes, right? So for example, we're bringing these new business intelligence systems with which we could monitor logistics and, every single work order that we had. We began to implement digital twins, more focused on how do we track the performance of each one of our wells and how can we, automate the whole kind of modeling process, right? Analytics process. We tested drones. How can we map out the surface of our facilities, right? So that we can catch Earth movements much earlier with LiDAR technology. Smart helmets, like whatever kind of sci-fi, techie technology that the company was bringing, I was in charge of making sure that that technology would actually generate value to the asset, right? So that's how I got into data and digitalization and all this nerdy stuff. And then in 2022, I decided I need a change. So with my wife, we're planning to go to Canada. So we moved. I left everything behind, and I said, I'll go to this city that is the most anti-hydrocarbon city in probably in the West Coast. I'll give it a shot, right? Because Vancouver is kind of the Silicon Valley of Canada, right? Like the tech movement here is massive. So I said, to hell with it, I'm gonna try it here. My idea was to get full heads on with AI and digitalization and all of that. And destiny has everything planned out. And I get here, I get a place. We rent a house, and I find this company that is called Dark Vision. Beautiful name. And it turns out that they do ultrasonic inspection on oil and gas wells. Okay. And the differentiator is that they have, I joke about it, but I say that we have alien technology, like our ultrasound tool, like the hardware, it's designed by crazy people, right? Our engineering and manufacturing teams, they're amazing. Like the piece of technology that they were able to put together is crazy. But not only that, but it's also leveraged by cloud computing and AI. So the speed at which the amount of data that we can get from each well, it's around 50 gigas, let's say, on average, right? So we run a scan on each well, we get 50 gigas of data, and then we need to analyze these massive data sets, right? So we use a lot of machine learning algorithms to actually help us on that. So we speed up the processing time, orders of magnitude. And our turnaround times are quite fast, and the amount of detail that you can see it's incredible. It's the first time I ever saw a breached casing, for example, and actually being able to see it, to render it, to visualize it, right, and to actually make decisions about that was crazy. It was amazing. So that's kind of my journey right now.
Okay, sounds an amazing journey, actually. So, out of your whole career, what has been your most challenging aspect?
I would say changing that role from an analyst, an engineer, driven by numbers and equations, right, and processes, to a leader, right, to a manager. So for us, as an engineer, 1+1 is equal to 2, right? And there's always a final answer, a right answer, right, or a best estimate. But the skill set for actually driving an effective team is completely different, right? A skill set that hardly any engineering program provides. But it's a challenge, and it's part of the growing path, right, that I chose. And right now, I'm very grateful for the trust that Dark Vision has bestowed upon me. Leading this new team of data analysts to on the casing integrity side. To me, it's very rewarding, right? But having to change that mental chip of going from I have the right answer to say there's no right answer. I see more of a process driven role where okay, what processes do I need to put in place, and what mechanisms and resources can I provide I can equip my team with, so that they can perform, right? They can get the job done, and I'm a leader at their service, right? I'm at the service of my team, and not the other way around.
Okay, so I was just wondering, you were saying that you had so many roles when you were newly graduated from the university. Do you think that that's helped you in your career? Do you think it's given
Absolutely.
you really good knowledge of all aspects of the energy sector?
Absolutely. First, it makes you very appreciative of the complexities, right, and the sheer length of our industry, right? When you grab the whole value chain, there are so many components, right? So many steps in the way. Being lucky enough to have stopped in many of those steps, not all, of course, because from the well to the pump, It's an innumerable amount of steps that would be very hard to cover them in one person's lifetime, right? But for sure, being able to have that point of contact with different specialties and at least understand how the industry thinks, right, and makes decision on a broader scope, for sure has helped me to better understand what are the drivers, right? Because when you're in I don't know, in production, for example, okay, you're thinking in terms of volume, right? You want to make sure that the barrels are going out, that the cubic feet are flowing, right? You're thinking in terms of safety, right? But for example, you're not thinking in terms of, not necessarily in terms of, I don't know, risk management, like an exploration team does, right? So each one of us, each one of those specialties kind of develops, its own mental frameworks, right? Their own, way of working, their own way of operating. So yeah, I appreciate the fact that it took me out of my comfort zone, right? I think my comfort zone has stretched quite a bit, because every year I would be assigned a new role, have to learn, a new, completely new area, right? Completely new procedures, having to deal with completely new people, right? So that has kept me on my foot, every single day on my journey, and I still don't see anytime soon I will be settling down on a specific role.
Okay, so what advice would you give to new graduates who find themselves in that type of position? Because when you are graduating, you're all excited and wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and raring to go, and your preference would be to have a job in what you've studied, but because you've had quite a lot of different areas of engineering, do you think that that's hindered you?
I'm going to say, I don't want to be prescriptive in the sense that, this is what you should do. I think each one of us has a unique career path. What I can recommend is embrace yours, right? And own yours. So there is so much learning that we can do on every single role that we take, right? So make sure that you're following that road, whatever role you were giving, that fate decided to put in front of you, make the best out of it, and just trust that on the other side, even though you might feel you're not comfortable, right, you're gonna appreciate it eventually. So we can learn from every experience, we can learn from every role, and if you feel that your career path is to be a reservoir engineer with 30 years of experience in that specific role, and be the leading expert in so on and so forth, this specific basin, sure, like that's great, go for it, right? I know people like that. I have a very close friend of mine. He graduated and the most stubborn person I've ever met, even though I'm arguably more than I think. But he got out of university and he rejected quite a few offers because they were not reservoir engineering offers. So absolutely stubborn, and he went for it. He embraced it. He owned that path that he decided to take, and from our generation, he's the youngest consultant that I know, right? So I think embracing that path that you've been given or that you've selected, it's important, right? And if you have to face change, embrace that, right? Because stretching yourself and thinking outside the box and staying on that kind of continuous learning and improvement mentality, that's valuable, right? So that's fine.
Okay, so have you ever encountered any career disasters then?
Career disaster? I wouldn't think so. Challenges for sure, right? Like our careers are challenges. Our industry is a whole challenge, right? Like it's not easy to find oil. My God, 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers under earth, having to drill, hopefully find something, and then hopefully make it economically, putting the money first and then hopefully see some fluid flowing 5 years into the future. My God, like, that's a massive undertaking. That's a challenge. Challenge we can manage. Disasters are not acceptable, I think. We've seen challenges in the industry. We've seen Piper Alpha. We've seen Macondo, right? Those are unacceptable. We should not accept, disasters. And we need to do everything that we can in order that to uphold our industry to standards beyond any other industry, right? Why? Because, my God, like, we're working with flammable, oil and gas. It's not an easy fluid to work with. So we need to hold ourselves to, the highest standards that we can, ourselves, our peers, our companies, and we need to speak up, right? And I think that the industry has done a very good job in kind of adopting that philosophy of, safety is first, right? Of, if you see a hazard, right? If you see a hazardous situation or a hazardous act, okay, you have the authority and you have the duty to raise that up, right? So I think as an industry, we need to keep that in mind. Disasters are not acceptable, and we need to hold ourselves accountable to that standard.
Okay, I agree, actually. I do really agree. What, in your opinion, would make an outstanding hire? What would you look for?
It really depends on the position. But for example, right now we are in this, we're hiring a lot of people right now. We are in this massive expansion process. And my approach right now at hiring is like, I don't really care that much about titles, like, do you have this certificate? Are you, this specific, specialty, this career? I think we all have the capacity for learning, What I look is for attitude, right? Like, do you have the right mindset? Our industry is not an easy industry to work in. There's a lot of sacrifice, working in it. I missed the birth of my first, of my first son. I was offshore, and duty called, right? And the moment my wife, can labor, I took the first flight to get there. And it's funny because the same thing happened to my father, right? So stories repeat themselves. But I think it's important to know that, to find people that are appreciative of, the challenges, the sacrifices that work in the industry, entails, the benefits, right? And the payback eventually is going to come. I'm absolutely sure of that. But, coming to the industry with the right mindset of, okay, it's a grind, it's not easy. It's a challenge. We are facing with very complex, very difficult, very technical stuff. So, you got to have a bit of, I don't want to say cold mind, because, I feel like in diversity of personalities, there's a lot to learn from each other. But having, the right attitude to want to face challenges, to want to embrace challenges, to want to embrace change, and to take ownership of the challenges that we're given, I think that's key to me.
Okay, no, I agree. I totally agree. So, what is your zone of genius?
My what?
Your zone of genius. What are you most good at?
Most good at? That's a tough one. I think I'm a very fast learner, right? Give me whatever topic you want, and I'll just, I'll gobble whatever information there is out there. Like, I don't mind challenges that challenge my my mental capacity, let's say, right? So I think that brain-driven challenges, I thrive on them, right? I enjoy them to an extent that it's hard for me to explain. I would say that, but I wouldn't like to think myself of having any type of genius properties. I think that would be too self-serving, maybe. but I do think that among my strengths, that's probably one of the easiest one to mention.
Okay, so what keeps you motivated when times get tough?
When time gets tough, I would think it is and knowing that this is a worthy endeavor. Again, the fact of being proud of what we do. It took me a lot of self-reflection, thinking what is it that we do, the type of industry we work in. But again, the days passes, and I'm ever more convinced that the work that we do, the sacrifices that we make, have a net positive impact on the world and the people around us. And in those hard times, family always prevails in some sense. So always keep in mind that the struggles that we go through, in the end, it's for the benefit of those around us.
Okay, what is the hardest engineering problem that you've had to solve then?
The hardest one.
Yeah, or the most challenging one, or the hardest one.
I wouldn't. Okay, engineering challenges. I think because I come from this engineering very mathematically driven mindset. Like they all have solutions, right? Like you always can find a compromise, a middle ground, a way to optimize. I don't see those as particularly hard challenges. However, for example, I see a larger challenge when we need to bridge engineering and design and technology with people, right? So when I was, the digital focal point for Repsol, it was like, yeah, we have this amazing, technology that is supposed to help us improve and optimize our workflows, right? It's supposed to help us operate better, work better. And, the technology can be supreme, but if the onboarding and the training and the management of change process to make sure that people buy into your solution and buy into these new changes that you're going to put in place, if you do not manage people accordingly, effectively, you will fail, right? So I would say that learning that was probably the largest challenge. It can be obvious for you, right? It can be obvious in numbers. It can be obvious in an engineering drawing, but it's not necessarily obvious for, when you take it to the social, soft skills level, right? A dimension. So, making that change of saying, not everything is numbers, not everything is dollars, not everything is it's volume of, production. You always need to keep in mind, okay, how do we drive change, through the buying of the stakeholders? That was, to me, a massive paradigm shift.
Okay, so how do you get someone to buy into your ideas then?
So the approach that I took, the approach that I like the most, is involving people in process, right? So no one likes, being told that the way you're doing things is wrong, right? No one likes hearing that, the tool that you're using, is not the right one, right? Because you feel stupid, right? Like, who are you? And the other thing is, like, who are you to know, like, what do I need? I'm if you came here and you tell me that I should be using this software to, plan my logistics, for example. What do you know about my logistics? What do you know about the nature of my operation, right? So that kind of the not built here syndrome, right? It is probably the biggest roadblock, right? If not addressed properly. So what I would do is I would onboard, key stakeholders in the team to actually feel, to actually contribute and improve the product, right? Not just as a signaling thing, but as a matter of saying, who better to tell you how this should be developed and implemented than the person that is actually going to be using this, right? So, bringing people over, right, and being very transparent about the process and what is the objective, like what is the reason behind this massive change that we want to do, and how is this going to benefit all of us, right? I think it's a mess. Like, think of the last time that your Windows operating system changed and how much you hated that, right? We all had that experience, right? So we need to be very mindful of how people react with new technologies, with new tools that you bring over. And, always listen to the end user in the end, right? Because you can have the best technology in the world, but if your user is not really using it, it's pretty much worthless, right? So I would say that. I think that's, as an early tip on how to improve those processes is, bring over your people, bring over your user, talk to him, make sure that they feel involved in the project of implementing this technology, right? That they can own it. It's not like you are the person in charge of implementing this technology and, you take all the credit. No, it's them. Kudos to them for being able to implement and to adopt this, new technology that is putting them ahead of, the competition and their peers.
Okay. So do you have any advice for anybody going to be starting out in the engineering industry?
Be curious. Like never stop learning. You have no idea how much you don't know, right? And I think you need to keep that mindset, a very open mindset throughout your career, because when you first get out, it's pretty clear that you know jack, right? Like it's obvious, right? And that's why you're a trainee, right? But it's harder to keep that mentality, 3, 5, 10 years into the job, and at the speed that things are changing, there are a lot of things that people don't know today that are going to have massive impacts in the way we operate and the way we work, right? Take ChatGPT, for example, right? We've heard about it. Like I'm pretty sure most of your listeners have played with it, right? But, many engineers are not using it, right? So we have these tools that are suddenly popping up, and you have no idea when is the next time a new piece of technology is just going to revolutionize, the tool that you're using, right? So yeah, always keep a mentality of, I don't know what I don't know, so I better keep learning things.
That's really good advice, actually. I really like that. So, do you think when you left university and you started your first job, do you think that what you learned in your degree or master's or whatever you're doing, do you think it helped you or do you think it's a lot different?
It certainly helps, right? Like at the very least, it gives you the framework to actually go and solve problems, right? You're yes, like I'm not gonna say it doesn't work, like it's not useful, but it's less useful than you think, probably, right? You're gonna learn most of what makes you a professional engineer on the job that at university, and I've seen analysts that they don't need to have a degree in engineering to be great analysts, right? So yes, getting a degree, it's a good step. Like, okay, you've shown that you can get the work done, right? You've shown that you can face challenges. You've shown that you can accomplish goals. That's great. Okay, next step, you need to keep doing that for for the rest of your life, hopefully, right? But yeah, bring with you that hunger for learning, that hunger for challenges, right? Not so much the actual knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's excellent advice, actually. So I'm going to finish with one final question. If you could turn back time, would you change anything?
No, no. I would study petrol engineering again. No, the trip so far has been so great. I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had. So amazed with what I've seen that I wouldn't change a thing. I don't think so. I think that we are made by, the choices and the paths that we stride. I wouldn't be me if I wouldn't have made those decisions, right? So I don't want to get into, convoluted, back to the future dilemmas. So yeah, no, I would probably make the same decisions then.
So you'd still study petroleum engineering then?
Yeah. So maybe a better question is like, if I had to choose a career today, right, I would still I think today is probably the best times to study petroleum engineering, because the amount of how hard it is to actually get experienced professionals in oil and gas, it's crazy. We are struggling a lot to find, good professionals, because since 2015, registrations to petroleum engineering plummeted worldwide, right? South America, maybe not so much, but in North America, we're seeing it right now. So, we are pretty much in a, tug of war for talent, right? So people are not studying, right? There's still going to be a need for petroleum engineers. And, we petroleum engineers, we are the owners of the subsurface. So you want to talk about carbon capture and storage, you want to talk about geothermal. We are the ones that know how to, map reservoirs. We are the ones who know how to drill a well, to get there. We are the ones that know how to produce fluids from that or inject fluids into it. We are the ones who know how to deal with uncertainty and with risk management. So, subsurface, it's like that. So, we are the kings of the subsurface. So, geologists and mining engineers, they get to a couple of, few hundred, maybe, I don't know if they can get to a kilometer deep, but, all oil and gas professionals, engineers and geologists and geoscientists, we go deeper. So I think it's a great career to study. And I would deeply and strongly encourage any young technical minded people to pursue petroleum engineering. Great career, great opportunities, great future.
Excellent. I actually think there's a shortage of engineers all over, I think, actually. Well, that's all the questions I have today. I would like to thank Mario for your time. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening and see you next week.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, I'd like to gently encourage you to leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts and share the show with another person. You can also follow me on LinkedIn or via my website, www.michellefraserconsultancy.com. Thanks again for listening and see you next week.